the Loaded Goat. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Chris.
Happy New Year, folks.
Happy New Year, folks. How did you spend your New Year's celebrations, Aaron?
TBD.
TBD.
Yeah, we're not recording this on New Year's Day.
You don't know how you spent it?
I'm not sure how I spent it yet. I can tell you about a few weeks from now when you listen to that episode.
Okay. All right. Well, I had a great night. I stayed up just to midnight, fell asleep afterward. Nothing too crazy. It's really pleasant.
Good. Did you go anywhere or did you stay at home?
Yeah, we went up to my family's cabin with a couple of friends. Just read the whole time, ate good food. It was quite nice.
That sounds like a nice trip.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to let you know your work on this podcast is paying off. Today I got an email from somebody with a podcast company, or I guess a podcast service company called FeedSpot. And They said, we have been selected as one of the top 50 conspiracy theories podcasts.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
I don't know. I'm going to guess it's all you.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. Thanks, everybody. I couldn't have done this without you.
I mean, and I know these conspiracy theories, I'm not trying to cheapen this list. But I'm kind of like, if you just riffing on silliness about the Andy Griffith Show can get us in the top 50 on this list, what other kind of conspiracies are these podcasts promoting?
Yeah, what do we get? Do we get to go to an award ceremony or?
I don't think that's an award ceremony I would want to attend.
I would absolutely go to that award ceremony.
You would want to go attend a conspiracy theory podcast award ceremony?
I'd sit right next to Joe Rogan. We'd have a great time.
Joe Rogan, I don't think, is doing I don't think Joe Rogan may be topping this list, but I think the people attending this would really be like, if you look at the Zapruder film, you can clearly see the driver turned around and shot Kennedy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. So anyway, today we're doing the case of the punch in the nose, and I enjoy this episode very much.
I thought it was fun. I like when Andy gets a little isolated. That's what's kind of fun to me.
He was getting a little grumpy, and it felt kind of like he felt real. This is like probably the maddest I've ever seen him at Barney in an episode.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
I think he wanted to punch him in the nose. I
don't blame him. I would have thought it would have been fitting if he punched him in the nose, but that might have just been too violent.
Yeah, that would have been. We would have had to go to like NC-17 or whatever.
I don't know about NC-17. I do think it might be a little TV PG.
Yeah, it could have been TV PG. That's true.
Yeah. You want to dive in?
Let's go feet first.
All right. This episode first aired on March 15th, 1965.
The Ides of March.
The Ides of March. We open with Andy and Barney going through some files. I guess they're having to archive them for the county. And we open and they're basically opening one, and Barney finds one from 1939, and he insists that they organize the files. And so Andy finally relents and says, okay, go ahead and put them in order.
This felt like one of the first times that we've actually heard that they're in the 60s, right? Because they talk about it being 30 years ago.
Yeah, they do timestamp everything. And, they come across one of Otis getting arrested for public drunkenness in 1941 at the Flower Show. It's his first incident of public drunkenness. And then Barney comes across an assault case between Floyd and Old Man Foley in 1946. And the case never went to trial. And Andy tells Barney to just throw it away or file it. And Barney insists that they need to get it to the bottom of it, even though it took place during Sheriff Poindexter's tenure. And this kind of makes me think, well, as I was doing this, I was like, this would be a funny serial podcast spoof of this, but it would only last about 3 minutes if we did it. It wouldn't be like American Vandal or something like that. I mean, it would really just be a very short one because there's nothing really to this case at all.
Yeah. It's a lot of he said, she said, he said, he said.
Yeah, over really not much. But Barney wants to get to the bottom of this.
Damages.
Damages are damages. I'm just really not really sure what his motivation is other than just being bored with the regularness of life. I mean, I don't know why he's wanting to dredge all this up, but he does. But I guess because, as Andy says, because he's a nut. But he goes to speak with Floyd and Old Man Foley, and Andy comes with him because he needs a haircut. And they come to Floyd, who was laughing over a sign written in the cement that said, "Bobby Greville hates Emma Larson," and they're now getting married. This scene cracks me up.
I like it too. It's cute.
Yeah. And Barney asks him about the assault, and Andy and Floyd are more interested in the pending nuptials. But Floyd says he doesn't remember what happened, and which is clearly not true, but this is just Floyd playing dumb. And Barney gets mad and storms off. And we cut to Barney speaking with Old Man Foley, and Old Man Foley just thinks the whole thing's funny. I mean, they're at the grocery store when he's talking about it, and apparently he fell asleep during a haircut and woke up to find that Floyd shaved him. And they got into it, and Floyd punched him in the nose, but it was more like a boop. And
I do think that Floyd shouldn't have been shaving a sleeping person.
Oh, I mean, there's that. I mean, I who could fall asleep during a straight razor shave? Who could fall asleep during a haircut?
That's classic Old Man Foley for you.
Yeah, I mean, that's just, that Old Man Foley. I mean, that's just so him.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had a shave with a straight razor?
I have, yes. It was gross. The person cut their hand, and so they were bleeding a lot, and they just wore a plastic glove, but it was really bloody underneath the glove.
Did you just be like, what? Could you at any point been like, you know what? I'm good.
I'm good. And it took like an hour. I don't think this person had really done it before, which, wasn't really confidence inspiring. Have you had one?
I've had one. I mean, it's not something where I feel kind of like, oh man, this is great. I'm getting a straight razor, close shaven. It's not like I think there was a period where it was just kind of like, this is like the height of comfort, or the height of, like in a barber shop. But it's not something that I'm like, I have to do. And, every time you've ever seen somebody get shaved, you have that happen to them in a movie, something bad usually comes after that.
Yeah, like a mustache or a goatee.
I was thinking more like a cutthroat.
Okay.
So he thinks the whole thing was funny. Apparently Goober was there too when he was 5 years old. And Barney comes back to Floyd and reads the statement to him. And Floyd's now all of a sudden disputes it and gets all ginned up. And in comes Foley and Goober, and they all get into it. And Andy tries to break them up. And Barney says, no, they need to get to the bottom of it. And Barney wants to recreate the scene. And he asks Goober where he was, and he doesn't remember because, like we said, he was 5. And Barney asks Andy to get up so Foley can sit in the chair. And Andy grabs Barney and just tells him, you got to stop this right now. And while they're arguing, Floyd apparently punches Foley in the nose, but nobody sees it. And we have chaos as we go to commercial.
Chaos ensues while we get sold merchandise.
Yes. And while they're like, the thing about this is like, how long has it been since you've been punched in the nose?
I've never been punched in the nose. Look at this thing.
Yeah, I mean, okay. So you aren't even punched in. I wouldn't think. I was going to assume if you were going to say the last time I was punched in the nose, I was a kid. So you never were even punched in the nose as a kid?
Sweet face, good kid.
You are both those things. I thought I was a good kid too. I have been punched in the nose before though. And it hurts.
I bet I could picture it. Oh.
And it hurts. And I can't imagine grown-ups, I'm not talking to an 8-year-old here. I can't imagine adults firing their fist at each other. I mean, you could do some sort of damage. I mean, the funny thing is they're all walking around with these little Band-Aids on their nose. I mean, if you hit somebody straight in the nose, I mean, obviously it's going to be a disaster.
Yeah, I've been kneed in the forehead before. That was pretty bad.
What woman did that to you? I'm just kidding.
My friend Patrick accidentally did it to me. We were joking around, and I tried to get out of it, and he just forced his knee into my face, and that was quite unpleasant.
I can imagine. Well, after the break, Foley is saying he wants to press charges, and Barney comes in and he says he didn't see the punch. Goober didn't either. Floyd argues with Goober, and Andy argues with Barney, and apparently Foley punches Goober in the nose.
It's a real whodunit.
It
All
is.
of a sudden, statute of limitations are off the table because we've got some real life crime happening on the table at the barbershop.
And back at the Taylor household, Aunt B has made a poultice for Opie to take to Foley, and Andy says he might need one for Goober, and he tells her how the whole thing started because of Barney. And she asks, why would Barney dig into all this? And Andy says, because he's a nut, which he is. And Andy goes to visit Floyd, who has been punched by Otis because he is a distant relative of Floyd's and took his side. You think Floyd was drunk?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I do too. So maybe it wasn't that. I mean,
he's drunk on the tonic.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he only had a little Band-Aid on his nose. And cut to Barney taking a report from Gilly, who got punched by Goober because he honked the horn to get him to come out and bring gas.
I get that. That's annoying.
Well, I mean, Gilly's the same guy who Goober had to move the car in. Goober had to move the car into the sheriff's office a few episodes back. So maybe Goober's got some pent up frustration with Gilly. I wouldn't blame him if he did.
Things out.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Andy sends Gilly on his way and tells Barney that this has to stop, and he is mad. I mean, you are just kind of like, if this wasn't a family show, and this was if this wasn't just a show about, wholesomeness and friendship and everything, Andy would haul off and hit Barney.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. In comes Opie. He got into a fight with Johnny Paul and was sent home because Johnny Paul called Floyd a crook and said that Andy was on his side. I'm just starting to think people in Mayberry need something to do.
Yeah, definitely.
But they then get a good call, and Lamar Tuttle punched Otis. And Andy sends Opus Day. Okay. So he punched Otis. And Andy sends Barney to get Floyd and Foley and bring them in here. And he gets a call from a woman named Betty Ann who got punched. And so we don't know why, but she got punched.
Can I give you a compliment?
Yeah.
This whole thing reads like a tongue twister.
It is. I mean,
Floyd and Flopus and Lopus and Otis and then Opie and.
I mean, I'm just kind of like, as I wrote this up, but I'm looking at this, I'm kind of like, this is like a Dr. Seuss, Dr. Seuss sort of tongue, see how many things you can say, and it is a lot of just people got a lot of people hitting people over. It really is kind of a whodunit here.
No kidding.
Yeah. And we go to Andy meeting with Floyd and Foley, and Barney says Goober ought to be here, and Andy sends him to go get Goober, and that's mainly just to get him out of the room. And Andy explains that they need to make peace, and it turns out that Sheriff Poindexter said the same thing 19 years ago, and what they did back then was they shook hands, and then Floyd gave him a free shave. They do the same thing, and Floyd asks for a free shave, and Floyd calls him a cheapskate, and they laugh, which is good, which is nice. Yeah.
Which I thought that was kind of a risky thing. Like, you just mended your friendship, and you're like, this cheapskate, my goodness. It's like, that's a little bit of a lob.
I think the point there is they'll realize the whole thing was really stupid.
Yeah.
And so Barney comes back with Goober, and Andy says the case is closed. Barney looks for the paper that was signed, and Andy explained that it was settled with a handshake. And Barney runs off, and it takes a beat before Andy realizes he went to the barbershop. And they run outside, and we see what is the most satisfying scene in this whole episode. Barney walking from the barbershop holding his nose because it got punched. And it's a very fitting end, even though we have the epilogue as we go to commercial.
Live by the sword, die by the sword.
This episode was produced by Pod Machine. They do a great podcast at a great rate. I was fortunate to get started on this a few years ago, and I've just been very, very pleased with it ever since. I mean, they will edit your podcast. They will do artwork for your podcast. They'll do the YouTube videos for the podcast, and they have a very quick turnaround time once you upload all your material. So I highly recommend it.
I'm pro pod in general. I love bean pods. I like pod hotels. I like pod apples, maybe. But you know what pods I like best? Pod machines.
Pod machines. Me too.
I like them better than podcasts. I honestly don't even really like podcasts that much. So I'm just thankful that you're here.
Why do you do this podcast?
To see your dimples, baby.
To see my dimples. Well, and if you really push hard, my pod machine might be able to give you some dimples. I don't know. So go to podmachine.com to learn more and enter Loaded Goat at checkout for a 10% discount.
And that's spelled just like Loaded Goat.
And this it wouldn't have worked, but you could have seen the conversation of Barney saying, "I'd like to take him in for assaulting a police officer," and Andy being totally. Like, I've got so if we start going down that road, you know how many things I could bring up on you. I mean, but that would be a little uncomfortable.
He just de-deputizes Barney, so he's not a police officer anymore, and he just got what's coming.
Yeah. So in the epilogue, Floyd has given Barney a haircut. Floyd charges him $2 instead of $1.75 because he used tonic. Barney asked for water, but he didn't say tonic. But apparently, he always gets tonic. And so this is, again, another tongue twister. And they argue, and Andy comes in, and he makes Barney pay the quarter. And Barney storms off, and Andy sits down to finish his haircut.
I think that's a funny line, too. It's like, can we finally finish this haircut?
Yeah.
I like it. This is a fun one because every other time Andy kind of is building people on his side throughout, and he's just stuck in the middle of a bunch of crossfire, and it's a new theme.
And it's a good one. I mean, I think one of the things that's really neat about it is just I feel like this is just a unique episode. It doesn't really follow any sort of real trope that they've used. It kind of does something new. Every character feels true to form. Daniel DeVasey wrote in Andy and Don that it seemed like, you could feel like, because Don Knotts is going to leave a few more episodes down the road, and it feels like there's actual real tension there. And there may have been frustration and grumpiness or something like that. But Andy's anger in this episode seems very legitimate.
Yeah, I agree.
I was also going to say, though, it really would be I was going to say, if we're doing this episode, I thought if we actually had taken the time and had more forethought, we could have actually done a serial-like spoof. But to really break out all of this stuff, I guess it would take 30 minutes, unless me just going, so-and-so punched so-and-so, so punch, so-and-so punched this person. And because it really kind of, this episode kind of crams a lot in there.
I can kind of try that right now. Just a little serial piece.
Yeah, go right ahead.
This episode is brought to you by MailChimp. MailChimp.
That's all you're gonna do. That's all you're gonna do.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. That'll do. I guess. I was hoping for you to do your soft, thoughtful voice that was just kind of educating.
On today's episode.
Yeah, that's that. I think I'm listening to Serial right now.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. All right. How many whistles would you give this?
7. 7 up.
I'm going 9.
9. Oh wow, You're high. Okay, cool. Good for you. Glad you got to watch an episode you really like.
I am too. Next week we'll do another episode I really like. But in the meantime, do you have any final thoughts?
MailChimp.
I'm Christopher, and I can't speak in complete sentences.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, folks. Check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you think about it, subscribe. Next week, we'll do Opie's newspaper. Until then, Christopher, go ahead and say it again.
MailChimp.